Strong, concrete suspicions, but not yet incontrovertible proof. That carefully worded phrase leaves the Syrian rebels accused of using chemical weapons by a United Nations commissioner. Carla Del Ponte said evidence gathered in hospitals in neighbouring countries showed the nerve agent sarin may have been used. The claim comes shortly after Israel was believed to have launched an airstrike near Damascus. Although that hasn't been formally confirmed by Israel, it's thought the aim was to prevent missiles from Iran reaching Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon, from where they would threaten Israel. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman reports.
Syrian state television says this is the aftermath of an Israeli airstrike near Damascus yesterday. Israeli officials are neither confirming nor denying this attack, and the pictures include destroyed chicken coops. Accounts vary, but local reports suggest that dozens of government troops were killed. Israeli and Western intelligence sources claim the target was missiles destined for Hezbollah fighters based in Lebanon, and that Israel wants no further involvement in Syria's civil war. These are the kind of missiles Israel wants destroyed. The Fatah 110, built by Iran, supplied to Syria, and with a 200-mile range, a threat to Israel itself.
The Israelis justifiably have to guard against the transfer of advanced weaponry to terrorist organizations like Hezbollah.
It's a risk because if the situation and the conflict extends itself to the surrounding countries, the nature of the conflict can be changed.
Israel has hit Syrian sites 3 times this year, which might suggest that a regional war of sorts is already underway. In one corner, Israel, backed by its Western allies, and in the other, Syria's leadership, along with its Shia allies, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hezbollah's main backer, Iran. The Arab Gulf states and Turkey are backing Syria's Sunni rebels. And with so many regional players in this combustible mix, the risk is that the conflict spreads. That's not what Israel wants, but these Israeli tanks could be heading back into Lebanon if Hezbollah retaliates, while Syria and Iran may also be searching for a response. Today, video emerged of a Syrian army defector claiming that he worked in this factory making sarin nerve gas, some of which he said had been given to Hezbollah. All unverifiable, but if true, likely to warrant further Israeli intervention. Though one of the UN's chief human rights investigators claims Syrian rebels may have used chemicals themselves.
What appeared to our investigation that was used by the opponents, by the rebels. And we have no indication at all that the government, the authority of the Syria government have used chemical weapons.
Rather awkwardly, the White House is thinking of arming Syrian rebels, and tonight the Americans joined the UN in insisting there's no conclusive proof.
We are highly skeptical of suggestions that the opposition could have or did use chemical weapons. We find it highly likely that any chemical weapon use that has taken place in Syria was done by the Assad regime, and that remains our position.
Today, this evidence emerged of a terrifying Syrian airstrike on the city of Homs. The Americans, British and French have reportedly been discussing airstrikes themselves, but with Israel already involved, and the truth about which Syrians are firing what at whom so blurred, military intervention may have been left too late.
Jonathan Rugman reporting. Well, our Washington correspondent Matt Fry joins me now. And of course, Barack Obama talked about red lines, Matt. But if both sides are accused of using chemical weapons, where's the line?
Well, Krish, the red line is beginning to look like a conga line, and rather squishy, constantly moving, ill-defined. And I think the point was made in Jonathan's piece perfectly. If Carla Del Ponte says with one breath that this may have been the rebels, and in another breath that there's no conclusive evidence, if the UN Commission that is supposed to be looking into all this is moving away from her initial assertions, then of course the Americans are absolutely right to distance themselves from whatever happened and to try and find some sort of conclusive evidence on their own. But, as was pointed out to me by administration officials just at the end of last week, the longer you wait, the greater the distance is from the actual incident to any pronunciation, the more difficult it becomes because the evidence gets depleted. And of course, amongst all this, you have clear examples of potential escalation of this conflict in the region, with the Israelis striking their targets in Syria, claiming that Hezbollah is getting involved. As I've always said, Krishnan, Libya imploded. The danger with Syria is that it explodes.
Now, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, is on his way to Russia. Any reason to think he'll be more successful there now than in the past?
Well, I think the whole strategy is really interesting here. And again, this was emphasized to me by administration officials. The only game in town is still a political game and not a military game. And the only game there is to try and persuade the Russians somehow to get on board to force the hand of President Assad. And it is just possible that the administration, using the recent probability of chemical weapons, which, by the way, the Russians themselves have said would be a red line for them, that he would be able to go to his Russian counterpart and say, look here, there is a real danger that this thing is getting out of hand, that it's escalating in the region, that chemical weapons may be used. It doesn't even matter so much if they're used by the regime or by the other side, but something needs to happen diplomatically, politically, for this thing to be solved. If not, we could end up with a regional balkanization of Syria and something that happened in Yugoslavia a decade ago, or decade and a half ago, but this time happening in a much more dangerous neighborhood.
Thanks, Matt. Jackie.